Somebody brought me this purse to fix, and I just want to show it as a classic example of something that manufacturers do all the time that is kind of a what not to do to attach leather straps to something. And that is that they stitched across the straps at the ends of them and doubled up the stitching on that end. Really, you should just stitch down each side and back up the stitching on each side and not cross that strap. Because if you do cross the strap, exactly what happened here is what's going to happen. It's going to tear right there at that stitching because you've perforated the leather across there. So to fix this, I'm actually going to wind up shortening these straps, wrapping them back, restitching them, probably doing some skiving and a few other things along the way, and I'll recondition everything to make sure it's good and strong. But it's just a simple minor repair otherwise. Like I said, just some basic stitching. So I'm going to start off, I'm not just going to fix this strap. I'm going to work on all four of them all the way around and fold them back. The straps are going to wind up a little bit shorter, but I don't want to use new leather on this because it won't match the patina of the leather that already exists. So I'm going to wind up cutting off each of these straps and basically trying again. And this strap is already tearing as well. You can see just with my fingers there, I was able to tear across there where that was already damaged. And probably the same with this one. Didn't even need to cut them. As I said, that's because a weak point was created there, and a point that it's going to dry out faster if it's not conditioned. Because it's got the holes through it, that creates more surface area to let it dry out. So we're gonna, like I said, take it back a little bit past this drier spot and probably take some stitching out, fold it all. Well, more than likely I'll put a rivet in it and I'll restitch it to put it all back together. Alright, I'm actually going to probably start with conditioning these straps before I even start to work on them, because I don't want to cause any more damage to them, and this will strengthen them up some. Alright, now that these straps are back to being up, oiled and lively feeling, it's time to get to work on it. Now normally, I would go between the layers with a utility knife like this to cut stitches. It's pretty easy to just hit those stitches and not go through very far. But I'm also going to skive the ends of these. I kind of want to get rid of this spot that's been stitched across. So I'm probably just going to skive these off with my round knife in this case, rather than doing that particular little back and forth there with the utility knife. But as you can see, a utility knife works really well to just get in between layers and cut those stitches. But as I said, in this case, what's probably going to work out better for me in the long run, or better for the customer at least in the long run, is going ahead and cutting off these spots that are stitched across, like I said, because that is a weak spot. And then to go ahead and skive it out like I would for the end of a strap. And then I can pick out the little threads that need to come out. And I'll re-stitch it with some natural colored thread that I have that's not going to quite match this, but it'll be fairly close. Now everything else is all conditioned up as well, and it shows some signs of age. There's some cracking and so on, but it all seems to be fairly solid. And I'm going to go ahead and rivet these straps back on, and then I'll finish up by stitching them as well. But the rivets will hold them in place and provide a very sure hold in the future. We're going to roll back just enough that I can be riveting in that solid spot. And my mallet is under the bag. There we go. Now I do not have the special rivets that the manufacturer makes, but I do have some that have a little bit of a patina to them, so that they'll sort of match. I just gotta get it turned over. This other one goes on here. Oop, other way around. Make sure we don't have anything twisted in a way that we don't want. It's always a pain to cut rivets back out if you put them in with something wrong. But it is doable. It's even more trouble to cut out rivets and stitching if you do everything wrong. Don't look too different. I mean, they don't have, like I said, the manufacturer's logo on them, the designer logo thing, but that's fine. If they hold better, it's an improvement. Now, those rivets by themselves are probably good enough to hold this. But I want to put some stitching back in there anyway to hold these little flaps back down. And I'm going to use some natural nylon thread that I have that's not quite the same color, but very similar to the color of the stitching that's already in there. That stitching looks like it might be polyester or cotton, something that was more absorbent and it's absorbed some color over time. I really like stitching with harness needles that are really small. You can barely get the thread through the eye of them. This is a number 277 thread. It's a machine thread that's pretty heavy, but definitely strong, but not as heavy as most hand stitching threads. And I may have to get the awl out to punch holes as I go if things aren't lining up right. Or just to get it to work better. Because it might be too tight of a hole otherwise. And I'm always keeping, awls have a diamond shape to them. And I'm always keeping one of the flat sides of the awl parallel with this side. And once we got a little bit of stitching going that way, we can start going back over it. Ooh. And that'll lock our stitches in. Just putting 2 or 3 stitches back and going back over them locks everything down. And then we'll stitch back down until we get off the end of this strap. And then we stitch back down and fill in our gaps. which aren't as noticeable on this because there's already stitching there. And it's never going to look as neat as I like stitching to look when I do back through leather like this that's already been damaged some by not being taken care of over the years. But this time at least we've got a solid strap of leather through the center. We don't have any place where it's going to be perforated across. These cracks look worse than on the camera, I think, than they do in person. And that's just a product of, like I said, it wasn't taken care of. It wasn't kept conditioned for way too long. Now, of course, I could get my machine out and try a machine stitch and hit every single hole exactly the same. But I don't think it'd be any more consistent than when I'm hand stitching. And it might tear the leather up even more. And if it's not obvious to absolutely everyone out there, when you're using an awl, make sure that the blade comes out beside your finger rather than into it. That takes a little bit of practice, believe it or not. But it's something that you have a lot of incentive to learn. If you poke yourself a couple times with an awl, it's very educational. Now, let's see if we can smooth any of this out. Got this roughed up a little bit. Okay, now I just gotta go around and stitch all the rest of them back on.